survey at the end of each year, whereby I informally asked a certain number of people which of my sermons they hated the most in the year that has gone by. And then I looked at the results and I vowed never to preach sermons like that again. Well, I actually don't. So this year I have sent the form out and the results are in, and I'm about to see which of my sermons you hated the most. And it looks like there are two at the very top of the list this year. Surprisingly, it was the Easter Sunday sermon in the number 2 spot. You may recall that was a sermon entitled The Blood Path. And some people didn't like the story of the animals being cut in half and the blood. Well, I won't repeat it then. And much to my dismay, the number 1 sermon that we hated the most was the one where you said we couldn't eat chocolate anymore. And a few people said that sermon made us feel really guilty. Yeah, oh yes! Well, can I tell you something? You're Presbyterians and you're supposed to feel guilty. If you don't feel guilty, somebody's not doing their job. Yeah, somebody said, you know, Mark, after that sermon, no one is going to buy you chocolates for Christmas this year. They didn't take into account that Presbyterians have a very warped sense of humor. And I've received more boxes of chocolate this year with clever little notes attached to them. People saying, come on, Mark, are you telling us that you're not going to eat these chocolates? Oh, well, Presbyterians, they don't like to feel guilty. And they don't like those blood path sermons that go into the history and the theology behind the happy Easter story. So just to make it up for all of you who felt guilty and sad, today I'm going to preach a feel-good sermon to make up for all the guilt that and you will love this sermon. You'll go out from here feeling great and feeling like Christmas, and hopefully feeling the presence of God with you. It starts out in my first church, and it was in Nova Scotia, and this happened about 24 years ago, and I told this story to a noon hour concert once, but I think most of you haven't heard it. There were wonderful people in this tiny rural community. One of the couples who always made me laugh was a couple named Scott and Sis. They had 10 children, and they had raised those kids on next to nothing, but they were wonderful, loving people. And I first got a sense of their sense of humor when I preached a sermon about parenthood. And I'm sure, as you are aware, only a person with no children can preach about parenthood. After my kids were born, I realized the whole thing was extremely tenuous, and I wouldn't say anything else about parenthood until my kids were all 100 years old. And I said in that sermon that it cost $100,000 to raise one child. It costs more now, by the way. And Sis went home, and there was Scott sitting at home watching Gunsmoke, as he should have been doing. And she rolled up the newspaper and whacked him up the back of the head with it. And Scott said, Sis, he said, what was that for? And she said, well, at church today, Mark told us that it took $100,000 to raise one child. And he said, well, why are you hitting me? And she said, well, Scott, if I'd known you had $1 million before I married you, we just would have had one kid and saved the rest for ourselves. So that was Scott and Sis. They were pretty funny people. And one day, Sis said to me, Mark, do you believe in angels? And ministers learn quickly to be very non-committal in answering questions like that, because you don't know where this whole thing is going. So I responded neutrally by saying, there are certainly some interesting stories about angels in the Bible. And she said, well, Mark, I believe in angels. And I said, so do I. But then she went off right away into left field, and she said to me, Mark, an angel has come to visit my house. And I said, well, there are certainly some interesting stories about mine. An angel has come to my house twice, Mark. And I said, that's nice. And she said, each time the angel came to my house, the angel wrote its name on my dining room wall. And now I'm digging through all that I learned in seminary. I don't know how to respond to that. She says, you can come to my house and see where the angel wrote its name on my dining room wall. So I went to Sis's house in that week, and sure enough, in a little tiny house with ancient wooden paneling on the walls, and on the wall in the dining room, there was the mark that looked like the tips of angels' wings, imprinted on the wall 2 times. And she said, look, Mark, it is the imprint of the tips of the angel's wings. And twice that angel has come to visit my house, and twice it has left its imprint on my wall. And you know, I said, well, that's wonderful. God bless you. And I'm glad the angel came to see you. That is beautiful.